So after some time passed since Chaska's release, a new 4-star weapon can now be obtained from the Iktomi Spirit Seeking event, and it's a sword that has nothing to do with her, but instead it's potentially good for some characters that I will talk about, and also delve deeper about this weapon's pros and cons. Spoiler alert, it's actually one of the better event weapons, but here's a catch. Okay, so right off the bat, this free 4-star sword called Calamity of Eshu has kind of unexciting stats. It offers 565 base attack, which is pretty standard, and then additional 27.6% attack from the substat. However, the most interesting part about it is the passive. While the character is protected by a shield, damage dealt by normal and charge attacks is increased by 20%, and critical rate by 8%. Keyword here though are normal and charge attacks. Nothing else benefits from this buffing, like skill or burst damage. Unless of course the skill itself deals normal attack damage, which I'll showcase later on. Still, I believe this is the first event weapon that provides critical rate, which is pretty exciting, although that crit rate applies only to normal and charge attacks. Also, keep in mind, due to me recording this video when the event just recently started off, I only have this weapon at R1, but when fully refined, we can see from the refinement screen, it will eventually have 40% damage boost for normal and charge attacks, plus 16% critical rate. So that is actually a very chunky performance boost, provided you can utilize this. And I know what you're thinking, who is this actually good for? Because the reality is, this sword is actually super niche. Like, not only does the sword user needs to deal majority of its damage from normal or charge attacks to benefit from the boosting, but they also need to be protected by the shield. So that means utilizing one of many shielders in the game, or perhaps someone like Shilonen can even help with that, since she can generate crystallized shards, although let's not kid ourselves here. Those shields will be paper thin, so maintaining this passive won't be easy. Anyway, let's talk about the potential candidates in this next part. But first, this video is sponsored by Perennial Order. Tell me, do you enjoy Souls-like games? Well, what about a plan horror boss rush battler, where you can die from one hit? That's right, you can only take one hit and it's over. However, the game is also fair because after each death, you learn new things, and thanks to the super fast respawn system, you can get back into action within seconds. And because of the unique skill system, you can customize the way you want to play by choosing from 32 different skills. Or if you want to, you can easily jump into co-op with your friend and have a blast together. Well, a boss might blast you literally. And my god, the game looks absolutely gorgeous. I'm a big fan of Eldritch designs, and the NPCs I've met so far are actually charming in their own way, while the horrific world of plants is truly mesmerizing. It also helps in a huge way that each boss and zone has its own musical score, so it's been a delight for me to keep discovering new places. And you know what's the most shocking part? This game has been developed by only 4 people, so that's why everything feels so personal and handcrafted. Seriously, I recommend buying Perennial Order, which you can do by using my link in the description. It's available on PC along with PS5 and Xbox Series, but if you want to, you can easily check out the free demo which I've played through myself before even accepting the sponsorship. So check out Perennial Order now. So, with a list of suspects filtered in the character archive by sword type, we can immediately eliminate these characters because they just won't find any use from the passive, and some of their roles just don't require damage anyway. Now, the first one that comes to mind here would be Keqing. Gone are the days when we would consider physical Keqing, since Electroversion is now much more better to go for, and to be honest, even at this point, her overall damage is kinda all over the place. Since if you play her in quick and team comps, both the burst and skill damage contribute quite well, but then when you're left with those few on-field seconds, sure, she can unleash charge attacks and maybe a few normal attacks, but I would say it's about as good as Black Sword with less crit rate in terms of comparing to her other weapon options, when considering her performance in quicken teams. But hey, it's almost as good as Black Sword, so that means you don't need to buy Battle Pass and save up money. Just keep in mind, again, the weapon's passive only works when shielded and with normal or charge attacks. Moving over, next one would be Ayaka. I mean, she can also deal some charge or normal damage, but as most of us know, the majority of her performance comes from the burst and skill. So for her, this weapon doesn't really matter either, and there are many other great options. However, when it comes to Ayato, yeah, this weapon is actually really nice for him, since when his skill is activated, the slashes he does are still considered normal attack damage, and you can run him in quite a few teams with a shielder, so it's not going to be a problem to enable the passive. And in fact, I will showcase this weapon on him in just a few moments, but let's go back to the list. Now, skipping over to Alhaitham, unfortunately, because the majority of his performance comes from the mirror projection damage, which is not considered to be normal or charge attack damage, this leaves the buffing only viable on his charge attacks to unleash the mirror attacks, and the boost is just negligible to be honest. Besides, he also wants elemental mastery from weapons as well, so this weapon is a no-go for him. Now, I also know C6 Lynette can kinda become an on-fielder with Anemo-infused normal attacks, but I don't have this constellation. So sadly, I cannot comment on whether this weapon is good or not for her. Anyway, finally, we arrived to Clorinde, and this is where things get interesting. Basically, this weapon is almost tailor-made for her, aside from the fact her burst won't benefit from the passive, but afterwards, anytime she deals damage during skill mode, her normal attacks will fully utilize this weapon, and I think it's one of the better free-to-play options for her. So, in total, we essentially only have two candidates for the weapon, Ayato and Clorinde, maybe Kaching in Aggravate teams too. But for everyone else, it's either useless or mid at best. Which begs the question, is this super niche weapon actually worth leveling and using, considering the limited pool of units who can use it? Well, let's find out. So here's a funny thing about this new 4-star sword. I actually had a reason to dust off my old Retracing Bolide set because both this weapon and this artifact set actually work in a beautiful unison. Since if you combine the R5 Calamity of Eshu with this artifact set, this loadout provides 80% damage boost plus 16% critical rate for normal and charged attacks. Of course, that means you need to have a shield active or else both this weapon's passive and the artifact set become useless essentially. I mean, just look at this example here. Ayato without a shield would end up dealing around 40% less damage from his skill, and that's not even Zhongli's shield we're talking about, which can also shred the enemy's resistance because if you're not using Zhongli, then you're gonna deal 60% less damage, which is pretty crazy. Of course, if we look at this the other way around, with a regular shielder, Ayato will deal 40% more damage and 60% more with Zhongli. So in my books, that's a really impressive damage boost. However, I would say if you don't want to hold all your eggs in one basket, something like Heart of Death is a safer option. Even though it provides 10% less of a similar damage boost from 4 set, at least the 2 set still gives 15% hydro damage boost compared to the, let's just say crappy 2 set bonus of Retracing Bolide. Also, I'm pretty sure more people will have this set than Retracing Bolide, which was always considered to be super niche that's located in a pretty terrible domain in terms of resin efficiency. On top of that, for someone like Clorinde, it's absolutely better for her to just run Harmonic Whimsy set, since it actually provides more value to her because the 4 set gives 54% overall damage boost to her entire kit, and as a cherry on top, she also gains 18% attack from 2 set. Anyway, with Retracing Bolide shenanigans out of the way, there's still one more problem that we need to solve. Are there any good teams where Shielder won't tank the overall damage performance? Well, luckily, no. Both Clorinde and Ayato greatly benefit from a Shielder, since both of them can be interrupted, and for Clorinde especially, someone like Toma is a godsend in overload teams with Chevy. Seriously, this weapon rocks here, and it's a delight to use it, and it'll only get better once I fully refine it. And as for Ayato, well, this guy can be used in many teams, but with Zhongli, he works especially well. And for some more random teams, Baizhu or Kirara in Nilo Bloom comps can be decent, although the uptime can be wonky with all the explosions happening from blooms that will end up eating away the shield. However, it's still possible to maintain the uptime in some cases. But overall, for just 2 characters right now, Ayato and Clorinde, this new 4-star sword is pretty great, provided you run them in a team with a shielder. It's also pretty good for Kaching too. I mean, heck, those stats are really fat if you think about it, and anytime in the future if a new sword user who deals majority of damage from normal or charge attacks comes out, this weapon is definitely gonna be a strong free-to-play contender. All in all, very niche weapon, but it has a superb passive. Still, it's kinda weird to see Hoyo went with this sword as a reward in a Natlan region. Maybe if Natlan releases shielders, this weapon will gain more relevance with mentioned characters, but it's also possible it might end up being good for a future character, like it was with Oathsworn Eye, and how great it was for Shen Yun. But who knows, maybe I missed something and you guys can let me know in the comments if you can see more use cases for this cool looking event weapon. Anyway, hope you found this video useful, and as always, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button on this video. Thanks, and see you next time.